This is part 2 of chapter 15 of Jane Eyre. I split it into 2 sections because we shifted gears a little bit. Jane has just been thinking over the day and remembering Mr. Rochester talking about Celine Varens, and we get a little bit of an idea of where Adele comes from. We're not sure if she's Mr. Rochester's child. She may be, she may not be. It's 1847. We don't know because we can't do a paternity test. So Jane's not really sure, and then she thinks about how Mr. Rochester sort of stopped when he was looking at Thornfield and had that little bit of a, strange moment where his face underwent this sort of change, and he thinks about how much he hates it there, and talks about it as if it's a cursed place. So this section of the book gets a little bit creepy. I'm warning you because, of course, when I read Jane Eyre for the first time, this was the part that I decided to read alone when everyone had already fallen asleep in my house on a Friday night when it was all dark and creepy. So I was very afraid, and if you scare easily, you may want to wait till there's some sunlight out. It's very gothic. Though I had now extinguished my candle and was laid down in bed, I could not sleep for thinking of his look when he paused in the avenue, and told how his destiny had risen up before him, and dared him to be happy at Thornfield. Why not? I asked myself. What alienates him from the house? Will he leave it again soon? Mrs. Fairfax said he seldom stayed here longer than a fortnight at a time, and he has now been resident 8 weeks. If he does go, the change will be doleful. Suppose he should be absent spring, summer, and autumn. How joyless sunshine and fine days will seem. So Jane would really miss him if he left. I hardly know whether I had slept or not after this musing. At any rate, I started wide awake on hearing a vague murmur, peculiar and lugubrious, which sounded, I thought, just above me. I wished I had kept my candle burning. The night was drearily dark. My spirits were depressed. I rose and sat up in bed, listening. The sound was hushed. I tried again to sleep, but my heart beat anxiously. My inward tranquillity was broken. The clock, far down in the hall, struck 2. Just then it seemed my chamber door was touched, as if fingers had swept the panels in a groping way along the dark gallery outside. I said, "Who is there?" Nothing answered. I was chilled with fear. All at once I remembered that it might be Pilot, who, when the kitchen door chanced to be left open, not unfrequently found his way up to the threshold of Mr. Rochester's chamber. I had seen him lying there myself in the mornings. The idea calmed me somewhat. I lay down. Silence composes the nerves, and as an unbroken hush now reigned again through the whole house, I began to feel the return of slumber. But it was not fated that I should sleep that night. A dream had scarcely approached my ear when it fled affrighted, scared by a marrow-freezing incident enough. This was a demoniac laugh, low, suppressed, and deep, uttered as it seemed at the very keyhole of my chamber door. The head of my bed was near the door, and I thought at first the goblin laugher stood at my bedside, or rather crouched by my pillow. But I rose, looked round, and could see nothing, while, as I still gazed, the unnatural sound was reiterated, and I knew it came from behind the panels. My first impulse was to rise and fasten the bolt. My next again to cry out, "Who is there?" Something gurgled and moaned. Ere long, steps retreated up the gallery towards the 3rd-story staircase. A door had lately been made to shut in that staircase. I heard it open and close, and all was still. Was that Grace Poole, and is she possessed with a devil? Thought I. Impossible now to remain longer by myself. I must go to Mrs. Fairfax. I hurried on my frock and a shawl. I withdrew the bolt and opened the door with a trembling hand. There was a candle burning just outside, and on the matting in the gallery. I was surprised at this circumstance, but still more was I amazed to perceive the air quite dim, as if filled with smoke, and while looking to the right and left to find whence these blue wreaths issued, I became further aware of a strong smell of burning. Something creaked. It was a door ajar, and that door was Mr. Rochester's, and the smoke rushed in a cloud from thence. I thought no more of Mrs. Fairfax, I thought no more of Grace Poole or the laugh. In an instant I was within the chamber. Tongues of flame darted round the bed, the curtains were on fire. In the midst of blaze and vapor, Mr. Rochester lay stretched motionless in deep sleep. "Wake, wake!" I cried. I shook him, but he only murmured and turned. The smoke had stupefied him. Not a moment could be lost. The very sheets were kindling. I rushed to his basin and ewer. Fortunately, one was wide and the other deep, and both were filled with water. I heaved them up, deluged the bed and its occupant, flew back to my own room, brought my own water jug, baptized the couch afresh, and by God's aid succeeded in extinguishing the flames which were devouring it. The hiss of the quenched element, the breakage of a pitcher which I had flung from my hand when I had emptied it, and, above all, the splash of the shower bath I had liberally bestowed, roused Mr. Rochester at last. Though it was dark now, I knew he was awake, because I heard him fulminating strange anathemas at finding himself lying in a pool of water. "Is there a flood?" he cried. "No, sir," I answered, "but there has been a fire. Get up, do. You are quenched now. I will fetch you a candle." "In the name of all the elves in Christendom, is that Jane Eyre?" he demanded. "What have you done with me, witch sorceress? Who is in the room besides you? Have you plotted to drown me?" "I'll fetch you a candle, sir, and in heaven's name get up. Somebody has plotted something. You cannot too soon find out who and what it is." "There, I am up now, but at your peril you fetch a candle yet. Wait 2 minutes till I get into some dry garments, and if any dry there be, yes, here is my dressing gown. Now run." I did run. I brought the candle which still remained in the gallery. He took it from my hand, held it up, surveyed the bed, all blackened and scorched, the sheets drenched, the carpet round swimming in water. "What is it, and who did it?" he asked. I briefly related to him what had transpired, the strange laugh I had heard in the gallery, the step ascending to the third story, the smoke, the smell of fire which had conducted me to his room, in what state I had found matters there, and how I had deluged him with all the water I could lay hands on. He listened very gravely. His face, as I went on, expressed more concern than astonishment. He did not immediately speak when I had concluded. "Shall I call Mrs. Fairfax?" I asked. "Mrs. Fairfax? No, what the deuce would you call her for? What can she do? Let her sleep unmolested." "Then I will fetch Leah and wake John and his wife." "Not at all. Just be still. You have a shawl on. If you are not warm enough, you may take my cloak yonder, wrap it about you, and sit down in the armchair. There, I will put it on. Now place your feet on the stool to keep them out of the wet. I am going to leave you a few minutes. I shall take the candle. Remain where you are till I return. Be as still as a mouse. I must pay a visit to the third story. Don't move, remember, or call anyone." He went. I watched the light withdraw. He passed up the gallery very softly, unclosed the staircase door, which, with as little noise as possible, shut it after him, and the last ray vanished. I was left in total darkness. I listened for some noise, but heard nothing. A very long time elapsed. I grew weary. It was cold, in spite of the cloak, and then I did not see the use of staying, as I was not to rouse the house. I was on the point of risking Mr. Rochester's displeasure by disobeying his orders, when the light once more gleamed dimly on the gallery wall, and I heard his unshod feet tread the matting. I hope it is he, thought I, and not something worse. He re-entered, pale and very gloomy. "I have found it all out," said he, setting his candle down on the washstand. "It is as I thought." "How, sir?" He made no reply, but stood with his arms folded, looking on the ground. At the end of a few minutes he inquired in rather a peculiar tone, "I forget whether you said you saw anything when you opened your chamber door." "No, sir, only the candlestick on the ground." "But you heard an odd laugh? You have heard that laugh before, I should think, or something like it." "Yes, sir. There is a woman who sews here, called Grace Poole. She laughs in that way. She is a singular person." "Just so. Grace Poole, you have guessed it. She is, as you say, singular, very. Well, I shall reflect on the subject. Meantime, I am glad that you are the only person, besides myself, acquainted with the precise details of tonight's incident. You are no talking fool, say nothing about it. I will account for this state of affairs," pointing to the bed, "and now return to your own room. I shall do very well on the sofa in the library for the rest of the night. It is near 4. In 2 hours the servants will be up." So just to recap a little bit, Jane's trying to fall asleep. She hears this weird laugh and almost a sound as if fingers have been tracing along her door. She hears another weird laugh a few minutes later. She can't possibly sleep. She plans on going to see Mrs. Fairfax. She gets up, goes into the hallway. There's a candle that's lit out there weirdly for no reason, and then there's smoke everywhere. She follows the smoke to Mr. Rochester's room. She throws the pitcher of water on his bed, runs back to her room, throws her pitcher of water on his bed, saves him. He gets up, and then instead of being like, "Oh my God, my bed is on fire," he's just like, "Haha, is there a flood?" and starts joking around, and then leaves her, pays a visit to the third story, goes up there, comes back, asks Jane if she's heard a laugh before. Jane says that it's Grace Poole. Mr. Rochester says, "Yes, I'll have to think about this matter a little more deeply," and then he tells her that she can go, and it's 4 a.m. now. "Good night then, sir," said I, departing. He seemed surprised, very inconsistently so, as he had just told me to go. "What?" he exclaimed. "Are you quitting me already, and in that way?" "You said I might go, sir." but not without taking leave, not without a word or two of acknowledgment and goodwill, not, in short, in that brief, dry fashion. Why, you have saved my life, snatched me from a horrible and excruciating death, and you walk past me as if we were mutual strangers. At least shake hands. He held out his hand, I gave him mine. He took it first in one, then both in his own. You have saved my life. I have a pleasure in owing you so immense a debt. I cannot say more. Nothing else that has being would have been tolerable to me in the character of creditor for such an obligation. But you, it is different. I feel your benefits no burden, Jane. He paused, gazed at me. Words almost visible trembled on his lips, but his voice was checked. Good night again, sir. There is no debt, benefit, burden, obligation in the case. So he says, thank you for saving my life. If it was anyone else, I would not like owing them such a great debt, but since it's you, Jane, everything is, it's all worthwhile. And then she says, there's no debt. You don't have to worry about repaying me or having any sort of obligation. I knew, he continued, you would do me good in some way, at some time. I saw it in your eyes when I first beheld you. Their expression and smile did not, again he stopped, he proceeded hastily, strike delight to my very inmost heart, so for nothing. People talk of natural sympathies. I have heard of good genii. There are grains of truth in the wildest fable. My cherished preserver, good night. Strange energy was in his voice, strange fire in his look. I am glad I happened to be awake, I said, and then I was going. What? You will go? I am cold, sir. Cold, yes, and standing in a pool. Go then, Jane, go. But he still retained my hand, and I could not free it. I bethought myself of an expedient. I think I hear Mrs. Fairfax move, sir, said I. Well, leave me. He relaxed his fingers, and I was gone. So again she tries to go, and he says, yeah, go, but then he's still holding on to her hand, and then she says, oh, I think I hear Mrs. Fairfax, and then he lets go of her. I regained my couch, but never thought of sleep. Till morning dawned, I was tossed on a buoyant but unquiet sea, where billows of trouble rolled under surges of joy. I thought sometimes I saw beyond its wild waters a shore, sweet as the hills of Beulah, and now and then a freshening gale, wakened by hope, bore my spirit triumphantly towards the bourne. But I could not reach it even in fancy. A counteracting breeze blew off land and continually drove me back. Sense would resist delirium. Judgment would warn passion. Too feverish a rest, I rose as soon as day dawned. So Jane's got all the feels at the end of this chapter, so there's been some disaster and some drama, but there's also this sense of maybe underlying joy. We'll have to find out what that's about in the next couple of chapters, but that is chapter 15.